we gather each Sunday for what? To be able to be together in spirit. What does that mean? To be able to touch each other, to share our lives, to be able to connect, to come out of our isolation sometimes, to be able to share our burdens, to be able to share our joys and celebrations together. And together in order to be able to realize that there is something more than just us in the world that gives meaning to our existence. Let us gather. Let us celebrate. Let us be together in worship.
For our chalice alignment today, I chose a short one by Maureen Killeran. In these hard times, let us look first to the response of love. In the midst of challenge, may our chalice flame bear witness to the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. In the midst of uncertainty, may our chalice be a beacon of encouragement, that our values may guide our choices. Let us look first to the response of love.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its calling. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Spirit of life. It all runs between us as people come and go and stay, as we learn and grow, learning what it means to be a part of a church, a movement, learning how to act, learning how to love, learning how to love, supporting each other in loving, not just here in this moment with those with whom it is easy to love, but also learning and acting to love those who are not as easy to love. This is our challenge, to love those whom it is not easy to love. We gather together in these ways. For centuries we have gathered together in these ways. Give us the strength, the capacity to be able to act with love wherever we are, whoever we are engaged with. May we be strong.
From Albert Camus. In the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. And that makes me happy, for it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there's something stronger, something better, pushing right back.
We, you and I, religious people of all faiths, all beliefs, we all have a difficult, extraordinary task. One that many shun, or rationalize, or declare irrelevant in this case. That task, this unreasonable task, is to resist hate with love. Rather than to resist hate with fists and guns, rather than to resist hate with blaming and demonizing, rather than condemning through hateful words or organizing to attack mentally or physically, rather even than closing the door to reality and simply hiding our heads. Instead of all these ways of reacting to hate, to resist hate with love. To resist hate with love. Naive, you say? Impractical? Impossible? Possibly ill-informed and stupid? Maybe. But it is what sets us apart. Religious people of goodwill are charged with the responsibility of not allowing the evil of the world to be what defines them, to be what defines us. And we are further charged with the responsibility of acting to bring healing to a wounded world as Unitarian Universalists. To be peacemakers. It is a frightful challenge. But as Dietrich Bonhoeffer says, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. Edmund Burke said the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. As Unitarians, our Unitarian side, we often talk about this responsibility, rightly so. We frame it in terms of social action, standing on street corners with placards, holding hands together to block the entrance to an immigration holding facility, marching to proclaim that Black lives matter. Generally, acting in public ways to resist what we see as injustice. But when we remember that we are also one-half Universalist, the conversation and the nature of our responsibility begins to shift from simply taking action to taking action with love. This is the cornerstone of our Universalist history. To love others as a reflection of being nurtured and loved by a loving God. Brothers and sisters, all on this earth, no matter what we have done or not done, to be kind, compassionate, cooperative, ethical, moral people. We are all, everyone, in this together. Now, let's face this squarely. Hardly any of us act in loving ways all the time toward those who have acted in what we believe to be hateful ways. We're human. Or perhaps we don't act that way even a majority of the time. The few, the blessed, the spiritually gifted, the prophets, they do. But the rest of us, me very much included, find the thought of acting in loving ways toward those with whom we deeply disagree, we find that daunting. Those with whom we disagree range from irritating leaders of groups who we feel are just wrong to the purely evil. We find acting with love toward them to be very challenging, almost it seems impossible. Acting with understanding toward those who in our minds are destructive, selfish, morally suspect, and without integrity may seem even unforgivable in our eyes. In today's world, think of acting with love and compassion toward ISIS, forgiving the acts of Al-Qaeda, or more closer to home, forgiving your obnoxious neighbor, or the brother-in-law who cheated you, or Donald Trump, person progressives love to hate. Is it possible to respond to the actions of these with love? Yes. Of course it's possible. Listen to Dostoevsky. Nothing is easier than to denounce the evildoer. Nothing is more difficult than to understand him. I'm going to get a drink of water. There it is. I don't want it to be lost, so let me say it again. Nothing is easier than to denounce the evildoer. Nothing is more difficult than to understand him. At our worst, our knee-jerk response to those who we define as evil or wrong is often aggressive, defensive, reactive behavior. Without thinking first, we blame, we judge. We attack with words or even violence in kind. Thus, according to our universalist forebears, we then become like them. The difficult, loving response is to seek to understand. To seek to understand. Quote, when you judge, you project your shadow onto others. When you love, you project your light. From Amy Belton. And then the reading that you heard from Albert Camus. A deep and meaningful way to be able to speak to us. In the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. And that makes me happy, for it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me there's something stronger, something better, pushing right back. Something stronger, something better, pushing right back. Anchored in love and an authentic attempt to understand those with whom we disagree. I find I'm just going to put this up here, it's sort of a shadow here in this part of the pulpit, and so I keep looking down. I'm looking down at dark, and my aging eyes cannot quite see what's there in the dark, so I'm going to put it up here. I find no greater example of pushing right back in love than he whose birthday we celebrate in a few days, Martin Luther King Jr. King, like one of his mentors, Gandhi, modeled nonviolence. If this is squeaking, I'm happy to turn it off and just use the mic here.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. There is more sound somewhere. King, like one of his mentors, Gandhi, modeled nonviolence. Nonviolence anchored in love. He leads us into our courageous higher selves, as he says. Nonviolent resistance avoids not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of spirit. The nonviolent resistor not only refuses to shoot his opponent, but he also refuses to hate him. Unquote. Dr. King, of course, is speaking to us here in this room. This is the heart of the resistance of love. I refuse to hate him, her, them. No matter what the offense, we may take strong action to resist. There are times when we must, but hating is optional, as is demeaning and demonizing. King continues, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate, violence multiplies violence, and toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. This chain reaction of evil must be broken. We must help break that descending spiral. We must do our part, not some other church, not some other time. We, all of us as Unitarian Universalists. By not allowing others who act destructively to decide how we are going to feel and how we are going to act. The practice of love, the willingness to pray, to send good thoughts for our enemies, the unwillingness to attack. In his speech accepting the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, King said, "We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love." Well, what an order. None of us can perfectly live up to his example, of course. We could barely live up to it at all. He seemed almost saintly in his capacity to stay rooted in his commitment. But if we are to resist hate with love, we must try. We must begin someplace. As Viktor Frankl said in speaking of the Holocaust, about those in the camps who provided leadership, who helped keep morale up in the hell that they were experiencing together. Quote, Frankl says, "Everything can be taken away from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." Unquote. We can choose to love. Let's bring Dr. King's primary mentor, Jesus of Nazareth, into the room. Though you UUs do not worship Jesus as the Son of God, we do deeply respect his teachings and the examples of his life and work, and strive to live by those principles. His life and teachings and the teaching of other prophets of other religions remain a central core of both our Unitarian and Universalist beliefs. Two of our UU principles are relevant today. First, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It does not say anywhere that I see the inherent worth and dignity of those with whom we agree. The second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Now that's very general, but even more to the point are two of the sources of our principles. Those two sources are Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves, and words and deeds of prophetic women and men which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. There it is. The transforming power of love. So, release your biases for a couple of minutes. Open up your minds and your hearts and listen to Jesus on this subject. From John, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." The second commandment is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And later he says, "Do to others as you would have them do to you." This trio of Jesus' teachings have been echoed in many other religions, all with the same central point: love others, treat them the way that you would wish to be treated. They do not say when you disagree with someone or you judge them to not be worthy or to dismiss them as being less than you. How are we to have the conviction and the consciousness and the strength to act in loving ways in the face of evil? We need to do our inner work, certainly, to prepare. We're responsible for that, each one of us. Especially being on a spiritual path, so that we can see with depth and understanding. 3 more Bible passages reflecting Jesus' voice may shine even more light on the nature of this challenge. Whoever does not love, quote from Jesus, does not know God, because God is love. That's right out of our early Universalist history. That's almost the definition, the core belief of Universalism in the early days. Jesus continues, "But I say to you Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Now, I know that this one sends theological shivers up many spines in this room, mine included. But hear the message of equality, of we are the same in it. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. And finally, let the one among you who is without sin be the first to cast a stone. Remember the story? Jesus comes on a group of men who are getting ready to stone to death a woman who has been charged with adultery. This is not just a terrible ancient practice, of course. It happens today in Taliban and ISIS-controlled territory. The woman is, of course, terrified. Jesus says to the men, let the one among you who is without sin be the first to cast a stone. They slowly drop their stones and walk away. Jesus lifts the woman to her feet and gently says, go home and sin no more. What does this story tell us? It says to me that if we consider our own imperfections first, it makes it much harder to judge another, therefore enabling us to more easily act with compassion and love. To paraphrase another Jesus quote, he who is most shall be least, he who is least shall be most. We who see ourselves through the lens of humility, understanding and taking responsibility for our own faults, are more likely to act with love. The Buddha is quoted as saying, if you could follow anyone with whom you are angry from the time of their birth to the present day, you would see why they did what they did, and you would be forgiven. To see another not as the other, to see another not as the other, but to see them as a brother or sister who is wounded and hurting and acting in destructive ways as a result of things that have happened to them over which they did not have control. Like the terrible handicap growing up in an abusive family can place on any of us. There are many examples, some of which are in this room. Or being harmed by a negative culture with which we are surrounded. Without consciousness, without healing, those scars can haunt us for a lifetime, setting us up to project our inner pain on the other. Since unhealed, we cannot see that pain as our own. And especially if someone like Donald Trump or others at a public level act like, remind us of the offending parent, sibling, or other family member in our abusive family, we frequently act unconsciously in anger against that person, maybe without even knowing why, in addition to our disagreements with that person. So, I'm going to stop talking at you for a moment and talk with you. I'm going to ask you to do a guided imagery, just where you're sitting. I want you to see how this works. Close your eyes if you're willing. Sit with both feet on the ground, sort of settle into your seat. Take a few deep breaths. Then, there in your mind's eye, imagine yourself at a public meeting. Donald Trump is speaking about banning Muslims from the United States. You listen in your mind's eye. Then the speech is over, and Donald Trump is walking over to you. He comes right up to you, and asks in a bellicose way what you think of him and his message. Pay attention to how you feel as he asks. In your mind's eye now, respond with love. That is, with respect and kindness. Stretch to see his point of view. Stretch to empathize. And slowly allow that scene to fade. And be aware of being in this room on that seat. And slowly open your eyes. Take a couple of deep breaths and help the breath bring you back into this present moment. In one word or two or a short phrase, a few of you just say what your experience was. What was your experience of doing that? You don't have to put your hand up, just call it out.
Challenging.
The what?
Challenging.
Challenging.
Humanizing.
Humanizing.
Leaving.
Pardon?
Relieving.
Believing.
Relieving. Relieving.
Relieving. Thank you. Relieving. I got it.
Frustrating.
Frustrating. Yes.
Compassion.
Compassion.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. How many of you simply refused to do it? One in the back. It is hard. This is hard work. I understand. How in heaven's name do we resist with love? We have to care enough to make the effort. We have to care enough to make the effort. There are stories throughout history and throughout all literature of those who have loved enough to make the effort. Study them. Use them as inspiration. Harry Potter's mother, Lily. Romeo and Juliet. Love in the face of hate. Love in the face of hate. Scott Peck, the author of the classic book, The Road Less Traveled, says, love is not a feeling. It is a verb. Love in action. We must take action to confront evil in all its forms. It is how we do it that determines whether our actions are helping to heal. Listen to this. I have to listen to this all the time. We must take action to confront evil. It is how we do it that determines whether our actions are helping to heal or leading to deeper hate. How we do it. Carrying our placards, holding hands at a rally, marching in solidarity, if we do all the actions of confrontation and protest possible, if we act courageously and creatively, quote, and have not love, we are as a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal, unquote. As religious people, this is perhaps our greatest challenge. Listen to Rabindranath Tagore, the Indian poet. God, again and again through the ages, you have sent messengers to this pitiless world. They have said, forgive everyone. They have said, love one another. Rid your hearts of evil. They are revered and remembered. Yet still in these dark days, we turn them away with hollow greetings from outside the doors of our houses. Unquote. Let us, at the very least, not let ourselves off the hook. Let us hold ourselves responsible to do our very best to act in love in the face of those whom we judge to be destructive. We are human, therefore we will act imperfectly. It takes a strong spiritual practice to do this well. Yet, just as we are, right now, today, may we be compassionate. May we be kind. May we understand first and act later. May we not act from a place of judgment, a place of I am right and you are wrong. To not act from a place of you are not as worthy as I. Instead, may we be compassionate. May we be kind. May we seek to understand. I believe that Dr. King and Jesus and many others have words of inspiration to offer us. We need all. May we, brothers and sisters of the Unitarian Universalist Church, act to confront evil and harmfulness in all its forms, with love as our banner, and with love in our hearts. May it be so. Amen. This is hard work. Being spiritual, being connected, being responsible, acting. It's hard work. May we support each other in love. So together, we can do it. Amen.
Amen.
Nurtured
By this community, inspired by all that we share, may our actions carry this love forward into our lives and into the world every day.
Every day. Amen.
Amen.